The dust of the Kansas trail swirled around him like a devil's breath as Ethan Vickers watched the small figure approach. Just a boy, couldn't be more than 10 years old, with clothes hanging off his thin frame like a scarecrow left too long in the field. The year was 1876, and the unforgiving plains had claimed many lives in recent years through drought, disease, and the aftermath of war. Ethan stood on the porch of his modest farmhouse, squinting against the setting sun, his weathered hands gripping the railing as the boy drew closer. "Please, sir," the child called out, his voice cracking with thirst. "I ain't eaten in 2 days. Could you spare a piece of bread?" Ethan studied the boy's dirty face, hollow cheeks, eyes too old for his years, the kind of eyes Ethan had seen in the mirror after the war. He'd fought at Antietam, lost his brother at Gettysburg, and carried those ghosts with him when he claimed his land grant out west. Now, at 32, he worked his small ranch alone with only occasional help from neighboring hands. "What's your name, boy?" Ethan asked, his voice gruff from disuse. "Samuel, sir, Samuel Jones. Least that's what they called me at the orphanage in Topeka." "Where you headed, Samuel?" the boy shrugged, kicking at the dust with a boot that had more holes than leather. "Nowhere special. Orphanage burned down last month." "Been walking since?" Ethan nodded slowly, feeling something stir inside him, something he thought had died on a battlefield years ago. "You'll eat at my table always," he said finally. "At least until we figure something better." The words surprised Ethan as much as they did the boy, whose eyes widened with disbelief. But Ethan meant them. In this harsh land, a man's word was his bond. "You mean it, sir?" Samuel asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't say things I don't mean, boy. Come on inside. Water's hot on the stove, and there's stew left from yesterday." As Ethan opened the door to his modest home, he had no way of knowing how this simple act of kindness would change his life forever. Or that 20 miles away, in the small town of Clearwater, a young woman named Eliza Vance was packing her belongings, preparing to journey west to take a teaching position at the very same settlement where Ethan had staked his claim. The following morning, Ethan woke before dawn as usual. He lay in bed for a moment, listening for any sound from the small room across the hall where he'd put the boy to sleep. Hearing nothing, he dressed quickly and moved through the house, pausing at Samuel's door. The boy was gone, the bed neatly made. A flicker of disappointment passed through Ethan, not surprising the child had run off, but still. Then he heard the sound of chopping from outside. Ethan stepped onto the porch to find Samuel at the woodpile, awkwardly swinging an axe nearly as tall as himself. "You don't need to do that," Ethan said. Samuel jumped, nearly dropping the axe. "Sorry, sir, I thought I should earn my keep." "It's Ethan, not sir, and that axe is too big for you." Samuel's shoulders slumped. "I can work hard, I promise." Ethan walked over and took the axe gently. "I believe you, but first breakfast, then we'll find work that fits your size. Deal?" A tentative smile broke across Samuel's face. "Deal." Over a breakfast of flapjacks and coffee milk for Samuel, Ethan learned more about the boy. He was 11, not 10. His parents had died of fever 3 years ago. The orphanage had been overcrowded and harsh, but at least it had been shelter. When it burned, the older boys had scattered, and Samuel had simply followed the road west. "Why'd you stop here?" Ethan asked, genuinely curious. Samuel looked down at his plate. "Your place looked kind. Some houses don't look kind." Ethan nodded, understanding perfectly what the boy meant. He'd seen enough of life to know that some doors shouldn't be knocked on, some help shouldn't be asked for. That Samuel had seen something in his modest ranch worth the risk of rejection said something about both of them. "Well, you've got a place here as long as you need it," Ethan said. "But there are rules. You do your chores, you tell the truth, and you learn your letters." "I can already read some," Samuel said eagerly. "Mrs. Parker at the orphanage taught us before she got sick." "Good, because Clearwater's getting a schoolhouse and word is the teacher arrives this week." Ethan hadn't planned on mentioning the school, hadn't even thought about it, until now, but something told him this boy needed more than just bread and shelter. 3 days later, Ethan rode into Clearwater with Samuel perched behind him on his horse, Sagebrush. The settlement was barely a town, a general store, a small church, the new schoolhouse, and a saloon that doubled as a hotel. They'd come for supplies and to inquire about the teacher. As they tied up outside the general store, a stagecoach rattled down the main street, kicking up dust that momentarily blinded them. When it cleared, the coach had stopped, and the driver was helping a young woman down. Even from a distance, Ethan could tell she wasn't from these parts. Her dress, though modest and practical, had an Eastern cut to it. Her auburn hair was pinned neatly beneath a small hat, and she stood with a straight-backed confidence that spoke of education and purpose. "That must be her," Samuel whispered, awe in his voice. "The teacher." Ethan nodded, suddenly feeling self-conscious about his dusty clothes and the 3-day stubble on his face. He hadn't given much thought to his appearance since coming west. The woman was looking around, somewhat bewildered, as the stagecoach driver dropped her trunk beside her and climbed back up to his seat. "Excuse me," she called to the driver. "Is there someone who was supposed to meet me?" The driver shrugged. "Don't know nothing about that, madam. This here's Clearwater. Someone at the store might help you." With a crack of his whip, he was gone, leaving the woman standing alone in the street. Samuel tugged at Ethan's sleeve. "We should help her." Ethan hesitated. He wasn't much for socializing, especially with educated women from back east. But the boy was right, leaving her stranded wouldn't be proper. "Madam," Ethan called, approaching with his hat in his hand. "You must be the new teacher. I'm Ethan Vickers. This is Samuel. We've got a ranch about 3 miles out." The woman turned, relief washing over her face. "Yes, I'm Eliza Vance. The school board was supposed to arrange for someone to meet me, but I suppose there's been a misunderstanding." Up close, Ethan was struck by her eyes, a clear, intelligent green that seemed to take in everything at once. She couldn't be much more than 25, but there was a determination in her gaze that spoke of someone who knew her own mind. "Town's been short-handed since the Henderson family moved on," Ethan explained. "Probably why no one was here to greet you." He nodded toward the saloon. "That's the only place with rooms to let until proper housing can be arranged. I'd be happy to introduce you to Mrs. Dawson, who runs it. She's respectable despite the location." "That's very kind of you, Mr. Vickers." Eliza smiled, and Ethan felt something shift inside him, like a rusty gate creaking open after years of disuse. "Samuel, take Miss Vance's carpet bag," Ethan instructed, reaching for her trunk himself. "We'll get you settled, madam." As they walked toward the saloon, Samuel chattered eagerly about the school and how he'd be attending, while Ethan found himself surprisingly tongue-tied. It had been a long time since he'd spoken to a woman like Eliza Vance, educated, refined, and undeniably beautiful. The next few weeks established a rhythm. Samuel attended school during the day, coming home full of stories about Miss Vance and her lessons. Ethan found himself riding into town more often than necessary, sometimes just to tip his hat to the teacher as she walked from the schoolhouse to her temporary lodgings above the saloon. One Friday afternoon, in late September, Ethan arrived early to pick up Samuel. The children were still inside, their voices raised in a geography lesson. Rather than interrupt, Ethan waited outside, leaning against a hitching post. When school finally dismissed, Samuel ran out with his usual enthusiasm but stopped short when he saw Ethan. "Miss Vance wants to talk to you," he said, a mischievous glint in his eye. Before Ethan could respond, Eliza appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Vickers, I wonder if I might have a word." Ethan straightened, suddenly aware of his work-worn appearance. "Of course, Miss Vance." Inside the one-room schoolhouse, Eliza gestured for him to sit at one of the student desks. It was comically small for his frame, but he obliged. "Samuel is exceptionally bright," she began, sitting at her own desk. "His reading has improved remarkably in just a few weeks." "He's a good boy," Ethan said, pride warming his voice. "Quick to learn." "Yes, but he's mentioned something that concerns me." Eliza's expression grew serious. He seems to believe his stay with you is temporary, that you'll find something better for him, as he puts it. Ethan frowned. I didn't mean it like that. I understand. But children take things to heart in ways we don't always anticipate. She leaned forward. He cares for you deeply, Mr. Vickers. It's clear in everything he says, and I believe you care for him too. I do, Ethan admitted, the truth of it settling in his chest like a warm stone. When I told him he could stay, I meant it. I just didn't know if he'd want to. A ranch is a lonely place for a child. Eliza smiled, her eyes softening. Perhaps what makes a place lonely or welcoming has less to do with its location and more to do with the people there. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Ethan felt his heart quicken, and he looked away first. I should also mention, Eliza continued, that the school board has failed to secure proper housing for me. Mrs. Dawson has been kind, but living above a saloon is hardly appropriate for a teacher. No, it's not, Ethan agreed, already thinking of solutions. The Wilsons have a spare room in their house on the edge of town. They're good people. I could speak to them if you'd like. That's very kind, but I've already imposed on your generosity too much. I simply wanted to let you know that I may need to reconsider my position if suitable arrangements can't be made. The thought of Eliza leaving sent an unexpected pang through Ethan's chest. I'll speak to the board myself, he promised. We can't lose our teacher now. As they walked outside, Samuel was waiting, practicing his roping skills with a piece of clothesline. Everything all right? He asked, eyes darting between them. Just fine, Ethan assured him, ruffling the boy's hair. Miss Vance was telling me what a smart student you are. Samuel beamed, and in that moment, Ethan knew he'd do whatever it took to keep both Samuel and Eliza in Clearwater. October brought the first frost, painting the prairie grass silver in the early mornings. Ethan had spoken to the school board, and arrangements had been made for Eliza to board with the Wilsons as he'd suggested. He saw her less frequently now, but Samuel continued to bring home stories of her lessons and occasional notes about his progress. One such note invited Ethan to a harvest celebration at the schoolhouse. All parents and guardians are welcome, it read, though Samuel had underlined those words with particular emphasis. You should wear your good shirt, Samuel advised as they prepared to go, and maybe trim your beard. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Is there something you're not telling me, Samuel? The boy shrugged with exaggerated innocence. Miss Vance just said it would be nice if everyone looked their best. Despite his suspicions, Ethan found himself taking extra care with his appearance that evening. His good shirt was hardly fashionable, but it was clean and without patches. He trimmed his beard neatly and even polished his boots. The schoolhouse was transformed when they arrived. Paper lanterns hung from the ceiling, desks had been pushed aside to create space, and a table laden with food stood against one wall. Children darted about excitedly while parents gathered in small groups, chatting. Eliza moved among them gracefully, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of in its usual practical bun. She wore a simple blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes, and when she spotted Ethan and Samuel, her smile lit up her entire face. You came, she said, approaching them. I'm so glad. Samuel has been one of our most enthusiastic planners for this event. I wouldn't have missed it, Ethan replied, suddenly aware of how many eyes were on them. It was no secret in the small community that the bachelor rancher and the new schoolteacher had developed a friendship of sorts. As the evening progressed, Ethan found himself drawn into conversation with other parents, discussing everything from cattle prices to the possibility of the railroad coming through Clearwater someday. Samuel ran off with his friends, leaving Ethan to fend for himself. It was near the end of the celebration when Eliza appeared at his side again. Would you mind walking me home? She asked quietly. It's gotten dark and, of course, Ethan said immediately. Let me find Samuel. He's already arranged to stay with the Cooper boy tonight, Eliza informed him with a small smile. He was quite insistent that it had all been planned beforehand. Ethan shook his head, amused and slightly embarrassed. That boy is too clever for his own good. As they walked through the quiet town, stars spreading like diamonds across the prairie sky, Ethan found the courage to ask the question that had been on his mind for weeks. "Miss Vance, Eliza, may I ask what brought you out west?" A lady with your education could have found a position back east easily enough. She was quiet for a moment before answering. "My father was a teacher in Boston. When he died last year, I found myself adrift. I'd always assisted him, but never had my own classroom." She glanced at Ethan. "I wanted to go somewhere I could make a difference, somewhere I could build something new." "And have you found that here?" he asked, his voice low. "I believe I have." Her answer was simple, but her eyes, reflecting the starlight, told him more. When they reached the Wilsons' house, Eliza turned to face him. "Thank you for coming tonight, and for everything you've done to make me feel welcome in Clearwater." "It's been my pleasure," Ethan said, meaning it more than he could express. For a moment they stood in silence, neither wanting to end the evening. Then, with a boldness that surprised him, Ethan asked, "Would you do me the honor of joining Samuel and me for Sunday dinner after church?" Her smile was all the answer he needed. Sunday dinner became a tradition. Each week after church, Eliza would join them at the ranch, where Ethan would prepare the best meal he could manage. Samuel took great pride in setting the table with the good dishes Ethan hadn't used since coming west, and Eliza often brought books to read aloud afterward. As autumn deepened into winter, these visits extended longer into the evening, with Ethan driving Eliza back to town in his wagon as darkness fell. They talked about everything: her childhood in Boston, his experiences in the war, their hopes for Clearwater's future. Samuel would often fall asleep on these rides, his head resting against Eliza's shoulder with the easy trust of a child who felt safe. It was during one such ride in early December, with snow beginning to dust the prairie, that their relationship shifted. Samuel had fallen asleep as usual, and Eliza had tucked her blanket around him. "He looks so peaceful," she whispered. "You've given him such a sense of security, Ethan." "We both have," Ethan replied. "He adores you, you know." Eliza's eyes met his in the gathering darkness. "And what about you, Ethan Vickers? What do you feel?" The question hung between them, laden with possibility. Ethan pulled the wagon to a stop, the horse's breath clouding in the cold air. "I think I've been alone too long," he said finally. "I came west to escape memories, not to make new ones. But then Samuel arrived at my door and you stepped off that stagecoach and suddenly—" He struggled to find the words. "Suddenly the future looked different," Eliza finished for him. "Yes." He reached for her gloved hand, holding it gently. "Eliza, I know I'm just a rancher with little to offer someone like you, but—" "Stop," she interrupted. "You have more to offer than you know: kindness, integrity, a heart that opened to a hungry child without hesitation." Her voice softened. "Those are the things that matter, Ethan. Those are the things I've come to care for deeply." The first kiss they shared was gentle, tentative, both of them aware of the sleeping child beside them. But in that moment, something settled between them: a promise, an understanding, a beginning. The winter of 1876-77 was harsh, with blizzards that sometimes kept the town isolated for days at a time. School was often canceled, but Eliza made her way to the ranch whenever possible, bringing books and lessons for Samuel. On the worst days, when travel was impossible, Ethan would find himself standing at the window, worrying about her safety in town. It was during one such blizzard, just after Christmas, that Ethan made a decision. As soon as the weather cleared, he rode into town alone, leaving Samuel with chores and strict instructions not to follow. His first stop was the Wilsons' house, where he asked for a private word with Mr. Wilson. As Eliza's landlord and a respected elder in the community, Wilson's blessing wasn't necessary, but Ethan believed in doing things properly. "You're a good man, Vickers," Wilson said after hearing Ethan out. "But are you sure this is what Miss Vance wants? She's educated, cultured." Life on a ranch is hard, especially for a woman used to city comforts. I know, Ethan acknowledged. And I wouldn't ask if I wasn't certain she cares for both Samuel and me, but you're right to question it. That's why I want to build her a proper house before asking, something worthy of her. Wilson studied him thoughtfully. Well, if you're set on this course, you'll have my help, and I suspect most of the men in town would lend a hand too. Miss Vance has become dear to all of us. His next stop was the general store, where he placed orders for lumber and supplies to be delivered as soon as the weather permitted. The shopkeeper raised an eyebrow at the quantities, but asked no questions. Finally, Ethan visited the small jewelry shop that had opened the previous spring. The selection was limited, but he found what he was looking for: a simple gold band with a small pearl. Elegant like Eliza, but practical enough for everyday wear. When he returned home, Samuel was waiting anxiously. Did you do it? Did you ask her? Ethan hung his coat by the door. Ask her what? To marry you, Samuel exclaimed, exasperated. I know that's where you went. You've been talking about building a new house for weeks. Ethan couldn't help but laugh. You don't miss much, do you? No, I didn't ask her yet. First, we're going to build that house a proper one, with a real parlor for her books and an extra bedroom. For me? Samuel asked, suddenly uncertain. Ethan knelt to look the boy in the eye. Of course for you. You're part of this family now, Samuel. That won't change no matter what. Samuel's face broke into a wide grin. Does this mean I can call you Pa now? The question caught Ethan off guard, a lump forming in his throat. I'd be honored if you did, he managed to say. The building began as soon as the winter storms subsided enough to allow work. True to Wilson's prediction, men from all over the area came to help, turning the construction into a community effort. The women contributed too, sending food for the workers and organizing a sewing circle to make curtains and linens for the new house. Through it all, Eliza remained unaware of the true purpose. Ethan had told her only that he was expanding his home to better accommodate Samuel's needs as he grew. If she suspected more, she kept her thoughts to herself, though her eyes often lingered on Ethan with a warmth that gave him courage. By early April, the house was nearly complete, a sturdy two-story structure connected to the original cabin, which would now serve as a storeroom and workshop. The new building had a proper kitchen, a dining room, a parlor with built-in bookshelves, and 3 bedrooms upstairs. On the day the last of the furniture was moved in, Ethan asked Samuel to ride into town with a note for Eliza, inviting her to Sunday dinner at the ranch as usual. But don't say anything about the house being finished, Ethan cautioned. I want it to be a surprise. Samuel nodded solemnly. I won't say a word, promise. That Sunday, Ethan waited nervously on the porch, dressed in his best clothes. Samuel stood beside him, practically bouncing with excitement. When Eliza's buggy appeared on the horizon, Samuel could contain himself no longer. She's coming, I'll go check on the roast. He darted inside, leaving Ethan alone to greet her. As her buggy drew closer, Ethan could see confusion on Eliza's face. The new house was considerably larger than the old cabin and would be immediately noticeable to anyone familiar with the property. Ethan, she called as she pulled up. What's all this? He walked to help her down, taking her hand as she stepped from the buggy. I thought it was time for some improvements, he said simply. Leading her inside, Ethan watched her face as she took in the new rooms, the spacious kitchen where Samuel was now fussing over the stove, the dining room with a table large enough for guests, the parlor with empty bookshelves waiting to be filled. It's beautiful, she breathed. But Ethan, this is too much for just you and Samuel. That's what I thought too, he agreed, reaching into his pocket. Which is why I built it for 3. Her eyes widened as he took out the small velvet box and opened it to reveal the pearl ring. Eliza Vance, he said, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. From the moment you stepped off that stagecoach, you've brought light and learning into our lives. Samuel adores you, and he took a deep breath. I have come to love you more than I thought possible. Would you do us the honor of becoming part of our family, of making this house a home? Tears filled Eliza's eyes, but her smile was radiant. Yes, she whispered. Yes, with all my heart. From the kitchen doorway came a whoop of joy as Samuel abandoned all pretense of cooking to rush forward and throw his arms around both of them. "We're going to be a real family," he exclaimed. "Just wait until everyone at school hears." Ethan and Eliza exchanged amused glances over the boy's head. "I think they might already suspect," Eliza said gently. "Mrs. Wilson has been smiling knowingly at me for weeks." They were married in May, with the entire settlement turning out for the ceremony. The schoolhouse was decorated with wildflowers, and Samuel stood proudly at Ethan's side as best man, holding the rings with solemn importance. After the celebration, they returned to the ranch, their home now, truly and completely. As evening fell, Samuel exhausted from excitement, they sat together on the porch, watching the stars emerge over the prairie. "I never thought I'd find this," Ethan said quietly, his arm around his new wife's shoulders. "After the war, I came west to be alone, to forget." Eliza leaned into him. "And now I want to remember every moment, to build memories that will last beyond us." She smiled, taking his hand and placing it gently over her stomach. "Then we should start now, because in about 7 months our family will grow again." Ethan stared at her, joy and disbelief warring on his face. "You're certain?" The doctor confirmed it yesterday. "I wanted to wait until we were alone to tell you." He gathered her close, overwhelmed with gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought a hungry orphan to his door that dusty day less than a year ago. One act of kindness, one simple invitation, "You'll eat at my table always," had opened a door to a future he could never have imagined. Inside, Samuel slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that he had found not just a place at the table, but a permanent place in their hearts. And outside, under the vast prairie sky, Ethan and Eliza began to plan for the next chapter of their lives together, a future built on compassion, courage, and the enduring power of love in the wild, untamed West. Years later, when their children and grandchildren gathered around that same table, they would tell the story of how their family began with a hungry boy, a kind cowboy, and a brave young teacher who found each other on the Kansas frontier. And though the West would change around them, with railroads and telegraph lines connecting the once isolated settlements to the wider world, the foundation they built together would remain unshaken, a testament to the home they created from nothing but hope and the promise of a shared tomorrow.